G'day and welcome back to the channel. So in today's video, I want to show you how to squat correctly. And further to this, I want to talk about some very specific technical elements of a good squat that you must master if you truly want to prevent injury, but it's also important to concentrate on if you are rehabbing yourself from any lower half injury. And while I would freely admit that everyone's perfect squat may look fractionally different than the next person, everybody should feel comfortable squatting at some stage if everything is functioning normally. And while everyone probably has their secret sauce regarding what a perfect squat may look like, I want to highlight what I find to be the most important. So as always, keep an open mind and let's get into it. And before I show you what I find to be the correct way to squat, we need to cover one really important concept, and that is the importance of being able to squat. I can't tell you the number of patients that I've seen over the years that don't feel like squatting is for them. It just doesn't feel comfortable, maybe it exposes some aches or pains, and ultimately they feel like there's something about them that excludes them from being able to squat or feeling comfortable squatting. But what I want to put to bed is this idea that anything about squatting isn't normal or good for you. Squatting is a normal human movement. And while squatting is something that everyone should feel comfortable doing, it's also a very good movement that exposes a whole bunch of hidden dysfunction that we may have accrued from living in this modern world. If your hips are stiff, if your ankles are stiff, if your lower back is dysfunctional, these are the types of things that are heavily exposed when you squat. And if a squat doesn't feel good, then it's important to remember that squatting isn't causing these dysfunctions. It's just exposing the dysfunction that you may never have noticed was there if you weren't taking your body through normal range of motion and normal activities. Every single human child that is born has the capacity to squat, given a few exceptions. The term baby squat is relatively well known because how often do you see a toddler or a really young child get down to the bottom position of a squat to do something on the ground, whether that's playing or interacting with something? So again, if you're having any trouble with your squat, just know that in a very respectful way, that isn't normal. It's certainly common, but with that little shift in perspective that I'll hopefully show you in a second, I want you to keep the concept of being able to squat comfortably, firmly in the back of your mind as something to aim towards achieving again at some stage. If you felt you've never been able to squat, you would have been able to when you were younger, but you may have lost that over time. And further to this conversation that squatting is a normal expression of normal human function, the other discussion point that often pops up when discussing what a perfect squat looks like is the differences afforded to you by your anatomy. If your femur's a little bit longer, if your hip joint's a little bit deeper or more shallow, these things can have a minor impact on how your squat shape looks, but they shouldn't exclude you from being able to squat to full depth with good technique. Because again, squatting is normal. Everyone can do it until they can't. And if you are convinced that some part of your genetics is excluding you from being able to perform a perfect squat, or at least the squat that I'm about to show you, then I would urge you to hang around for the video after this one that goes through how to reclaim some of the lost mechanical function that you may have lost without realizing it, that may be robbing you of your ability to squat in a more optimal way. We can't assume that the reason why you can't squat is a genetic issue and it's out of your control until you go looking for and try and clean up some of those hidden restrictions or hidden dysfunctions and see what's left over. Because if you just assume that your hip looks different to my hip, so that must be the reason why you can't squat, then you may be robbing you of capacity that you may have had previously but have ultimately lost without you realizing it. So please keep that in mind as well. So with any discussion about what a perfect squat looks like, we also may need to concede that you may have lost some of the natural inherent function that will allow you to squat perfectly. So as we go through what a perfect squat looks like, if you don't feel that this is achievable for you at the moment, that is okay. I'll talk about how to scale this afterwards. But as I mentioned, if you're missing hip flexion flexibility, hip rotational flexibility, if you're missing ankle mobility, maybe you have knee pain, maybe your back's not functioning normally, you may need to work at improving these things before you feel like your squat becomes more optimal in its shape and its execution. But thankfully, whether you do feel a bit stiff or restricted in some way, it doesn't change what an optimal squat looks like. It may just change your expectations of what you can do today, with the idea that as you get better at this, it should become more consistently closer to an optimal squat over time. And so how this looks, for me clinically as a physiotherapist, if I'm instructing you on how to squat correctly, the very first thing that I would ask you to do is to look down and see what direction your feet are pointing. In a perfect world, you should be able to squat to full depth with your feet dead straight. You will absolutely be able to squat to full depth if your feet are turned out. But if you can't also express full range of motion with your feet straight, then you may be missing something. Your ankle's stiff, your hips restricted, something like that. From a foot pressure perspective, we don't want you to feel like all your pressure is through your heels. We don't want to feel like all your pressure is through the ball of your foot. We naturally want an even pressure between the heel and the ball of your foot. We also don't want you to feel like the pressure is on the inside or the outside of your foot. Again, we want your big toe on the ground, little toe on the ground, pressure through your heel, pressure through the balls of your feet. This is just the basic ability to have even distribution through your feet. And we want those feet to be about shoulder width apart. If you are missing some ankle flexibility or some hip range of motion, you might find that the further your feet are apart, the easier it is to get down into a squat. The next thing that we want to think of here is before you even begin to think of squatting down, we need to create stability through your foot and through your hips to create a stable platform that you can translate your body up and down through. And how that looks is from this position, again, keeping your big toes on the ground here, keeping your legs straight, what I want you to do is imagine that you are screwing your knees outwards. Again, without lifting your big toes up off the ground, keep your big toes down and really screw those legs into your feet. And what you should hopefully see is when you do this, your legs will rotate outwards and the arch of your foot will lift up, creating a stable platform to squat on top of. You should also notice that when you do this, that the muscles in your hips, those hip external rotators, will also lock in and create a really stable hip joint. And once you've done this, you should feel like you're a little bit more connected to the ground. You should feel sort of tensed and strong in this position. And all we've done here is just create a basic, consistent, stable platform to begin this squat. And once you feel comfortable with that, the next thing that we're going to do is when we initiate the squat movement, I want you to imagine that you're sitting back and down onto a chair. We don't want your hips to be forward. We don't want you to bend through your knees. We want you to imagine that you're taking your hips back and down as you squat down. One of the misconceptions that people have about squatting is that when we talk about maintaining a straight back, a lot of people misinterpret that as keeping your back vertical. So when they squat, they essentially try and sort of lift the heels up, keep their bottom in and drop themselves down in this position. But instead of thinking of keeping your back vertical, just imagine that you're keeping your back straight. So what that means is that as you bring your hips back, your shoulders will shift forwards, allowing you to maintain a strong, straight, neutral spine the whole way through. So if you have your feet in a good position, even weight distribution, creating that knees out stability where you're screwing those legs into the ground and you feel like you're up nice and tall, maintaining a straight spine. As you throw your hips back and lower yourself down, you just want to follow that all the way down until you reach the natural end point of being able to maintain that shape. So for me, I'm relatively flexible enough that I feel like I can do this in a relatively good position. But if you feel like you're lacking some flexibility through your ankle, through your hip, or even through your lower back, the key to a perfect squat for you at any given point in time is just going down as deep as you feel you can before you feel you start to lose this position. If you can get all the way down into that position and you don't feel like your feet want to start to turn out, if you don't feel like your heels want to start to lift up, if you don't feel like your knees are trying to cave in to give you a way to go around some of that restriction, or as you squat down, if you feel like you start to lose that straight spinal position, either by doing a bit of a butt wink where your bottom tucks in underneath, or you feel like you start to roll forwards, or you feel like you start to fall backwards, any of those cues tell us that you've just run into a potentially hidden restriction somewhere. And in a conversation about how to squat correctly, all I want you to do is just stop at whatever point you feel you get to where you feel like something wants to start to change. Just work in and out of that range, because if you don't, and you feel like you just go for depth and just do whatever you feel you can to get down to the bottom, yes, you'll be successfully completing a squat, but you'll be training a poor movement pattern in over the top. And although in theory there are no bad movements, there are absolutely some movements that are better at exposing hidden dysfunction than others, and certain movements that don't translate to optimal physical function. Do yourself a favor and look at how you squat in a mirror and compare it to how this ideal correct squat pattern looks and feels for you. Because if you find that you can't maintain this great position and get all the way down to the ground, then it may just shine a light on some things that you can change that will will improve how you load up that dysfunction and may ultimately be getting rid of the cause of why that dysfunction was allowed to be there. And as I mentioned a little bit ago, if you feel that you are special or you have some genetic difference that excludes you from squatting, you may be selling yourself short and robbing yourself of better function, which then may improve how you move regardless of what your genetics may look like. But ultimately, a perfect squat requires you to have your feet pointing straight, even weight distribution front and back, side to side, shoulder width apart or something similar to that, creating that rotational stability through the arch of your foot, through your hips, maintaining a straight back as you lower yourself down as deep as you feel you can without losing that shape. If you feel like that is a little bit too hard for you, or it exposes something that you didn't realize was there, that's showing you something that you may never have noticed because your body's always trying to work around things. And you can do something about that. You can free up the stiff spots, you can improve the strength in areas that need to get stronger, which should ultimately allow you to feel more comfortable performing a deep squat correctly over time. And while I mentioned before how one of the scalable techniques is just going down as deep as you feel comfortable without surpassing what you can maintain consistently, another thing you can do if squatting is important to you in the short term is you can do it off a step that lifts your heels up off the ground a little bit. What this does is this takes out some of the ankle range of motion demands. So for me, I've always had stiffer ankles and I work hard on trying to maintain and improve that flexibility. If I just practice on something that has a slight elevation, then it does allow me the luxury of being able to express that normal motion more effectively. But again, if you do that and you feel that your squat instantly improves by just lifting your heels up a little bit, then it's clear that your ankles are restricted, and make that a priority.